All right, what's happening, everybody? It's me. I'm back, Robert Phoenix, for another edition of Sunday Night Astro Live, and getting a little bit of a late start tonight. But thank you for your patience, as always. Got a little flower of life going on in the background. Shades of Drunvalel Melchizedek, and all that rage, the rage that was the flower of life back in the mid '90s when Drunvalo was kind of at the height of his powers, the sorcerer of the flower of life and all things sacredly geometrical. Whatever happened to that guy? he was uh, he was an interesting character to say the least. Um, he got behind this young woman. I forget her name now. Little grandmother. Do you remember Little Grandmother at all? Little Grand been German, and she was supposed to have been like the reincarnation of this sacred Indian woman, priestess, shamaness, and she was like this big deal for. And then I listened to Little Grandmother give a talk, and I'm like, this is embarrassing. Why are they trotting this young girl out to make these just absolutely kinds of ridiculous mantra like um I don't know, how would I describe it, prayers or talks. It was really embarrassing. And she seemed like a nice girl, right? But this was all being driven by Drunvalo Melchizedek. And so I don't want to get too caught up in the weeds with him because he had a very dubious background, to say the least. But he did popularize this whole idea of the flower of life in sacred geometry, which, by the way, I'm going to tell you I am not an expert at. I can kind of grasp it philosophically, but we are going to talk about more about Terrence Howard tonight than the actual flower of life itself, and primarily his astrological chart. Now, I don't have a time for Terrence Howard because, well, sometimes it just happens. But I did rectify his chart based on kind of what I think is going on in the natal chart with him, also with some transits. So we're going to take a crack at the rectified Terrence Howard chart. Now, a lot of people think that uh, he's a visionary, he's a prophet. Other people think that he's a total scam artist, that he basically has taken uh, the work of other people and sort of piggybacked on it. And on this whole idea of we'll call for lack of a better term hyperdimensional physics, because I think that's what he's talking about. And I'm not here to cast judgment or aspersion on Terrence Howard one way or the other. But I do think it's relatively interesting. And there, I'm not sure I agree with everything. I'm not sure I agree with. There's no such thing as the zero. I'm not sure I agree with that. But just because I don't agree with it doesn't mean that maybe in the grand cosmic scheme of things that Terrence may not be true or correct around it. But I do find it rather interesting, and especially during a time where you know we're being given and force fed all of these alternative energy options. Not even all. They're not. It's like there's not a lot out there, right? There's wind, and then there's solar, and that's it, right? In a marketplace of ideas with a planet that theoretically has how many billion people? 7 billion people. You don't think that a handful of them couldn't come up with something better than that? There's a video that's making the rounds on YouTube that details all the lives, and I say lives in the sense that they were lost, the lives of inventors that had come up with over unity devices, hydrogen cell or water powered engines, right? And they're not very long for this world. So somebody is, or somebody's, have a vested interest in controlling the scale of the social economy. And I've talked about this before, but the last best theoretical technological development that we've had in our society is the iPhone or the smartphone, but primarily the iPhone, because it was the first phone that was able to take advantage of some really interesting technology that I think had been worked out at NASA, which allowed you to flip the screen and do all the shit that we just take for granted now. Right. And I remember the first time, somebody had, what was it, an iPhone 7 or whatever it was, the first one. He pulled it out. It was this guy named Jay. And you looked, I'm like, wow, that's pretty impressive there, Jay. That's a pretty slick piece of technology. And it was funny because I was rocking this cell phone that I had bought on eBay, and it was like really fucking small. It was about like that. And it was like a flip phone. And I think it was from the Middle East or someplace like that, because there was Arabic, like sort of Arabic shit on this phone. And I just thought that smaller was in the phone world was better, right? Like I thought that, we're going to start off with these, these giant fucking bricks, and then eventually everything becomes so small that the smaller was better in terms of. So I'll go in that direction. I'll get this really cool small little fucking phone from eBay, which was unlocked, and I thought, oh, look at this, man. I got this cool piece of technology. And Jay brings out his iPhone 7. He goes, look. I'm like, okay. And I didn't get an iPhone for a long time. My son actually got an iPhone before me. I think he got it. He was like, I don't know, maybe 10 or 11 years old, which I was not in favor of. I'm just on the record with that. I was like, no, do not get him this phone. No, not a good idea. If you're going to get him a phone, get him a flip phone, right? If you want him to stay in touch with, you meaning, parent, the other parent, like just get him a little flip phone. So I wasn't into it, but he had an iPhone before I did. And I held off on getting an iPhone for a long time. I had this that was made for construction sites. It was fucking indestructible. And it had like this big rubber case on it. It was completely waterproof. And nobody else had one. I thought, yeah, man, look at this. And this was after, because I'd gone the whatchamacallit, the Sanyo route. I'd gotten the Sanyo. I was like, I don't want to get an iPhone. Everybody has an iPhone. I like the Sanyo. It looked better. And then somebody stole my Sanyo. I left it in my car, and they got in my car and they stole it. This like kind of construction site, Nokia. And then I had that for a while. And eventually I wound up getting an iPhone. I didn't get an iPhone until, I don't know, maybe 2017 or something like that. So I think they came out in 2007. So it was 10 years before I got an iPhone. Anyway, that was it. That was the last piece of theoretical high-tech sort of explosion that that they gave us, and it's changed the world dramatically. Like it shrunk the world. Um, the cell phone in general really changed the world. Like, when they started to run these color revolutions in the early 2000s, I think they were using Blackberries, and they were coordinating all these color revolutions via the cell phone, which had never been done before, right? That kind of communication had never been that ubiquitous. People would have had to have used regular telephones or walkie-talkies, and now all of a sudden, they had these cell phones, and they could coordinate everything. They could message everybody all at once, and they were a huge tool. They were incredibly powerful when it came to these color revolutions, and even as close or as uh, recent as 2020, when we had the summer of Floyd. The cell phone was a huge tool in organizing people and getting people to meet certain areas, and I think they had their own channels, right, that they were able to use, and they had they would, I think a lot of the times they would meet on some of these uh like chat rooms for like game streaming and shit like that. Like that's where they would go. But it would be like a really unpopular game, or they'd have their own sort of like game theater set up, right? And then they would just go in, and that's where they would meet. So they wouldn't be passing messages across Apple Text or any of the usual suspects. Like they would actually go somewhere, log in, and go to these places, and that's where they get all their instructions. So the cell phone has been completely socially disruptive in that regard. Became the main weapon and the tool for these color revolutions. The other thing that the cell phone has done in a lot of ways is that it's really shrunk the world. So, for instance, if you're somebody who's living in a place like Mali or Somalia or Senegal, or and you have a cell phone, right? You have access to the entire world. I mean, just think of the Nigerians and their cell phones, or just think of the Indian scammers. And I know a lot of the time they'll be in a call center, but they'll use cell phones to call people, right? So now they had access, and cheap access, to the rest of the world. I mean, prior to that, if you were going to make a phone call from, you know, Nigeria to the United States, that'd be a really fucking expensive call. You basically would have had to have bilked somebody, with that first call to cover at least half the call, because it was so expensive. So once all uh, those fees for calling long distance shrank, it was really simple for people from other countries to just, move in and become, really invasive in a lot of ways. And not only that, but then you have the streaming element, and people were able to see the United States and the West through a very different kind of lens. Prior to the cell phone, if you lived in, quote unquote, third world country, you would have to depend on maybe some kind of, I don't know, newspaper, or if there might be a magazine or two, right? You'd be able to see pictures. Or if you were lucky, you could go to like a bar or a cafe, and they would have satellite TV, and you might be able to see like the BBC or Canal Plus or something like that, on your set, or on the set inside the cafe. So you'd be able to get some imagery and some pictures from other parts of the world, but you literally would have to go somewhere in order to experience that, and then it would be very, very selective. You'd only see what you know would be viewable and available, through those networks. But now, when the cell phone, especially the iPhone, and then you put that together, or the Samsung, or I had a Samsung, it was not a Sandy, it was a Samsung. You put that together with YouTube, and all of a sudden, now there's a window on the world that had never been there before. right? Now there's like this portal in time space between people who had not experienced the West at all. And now they have all these like, windows to the West. And then, of course, we have the great quote unquote migrations now. And a lot of those are also being coordinated via cell phone, right? They're all coordinated via cell phone. So from the point where you're actually picked up to the point where you're dropped off to the point where you stay in touch with the people that are, you know, giving you whatever you are supposed to have, which is either digital money or maps or directions. There are apps that they have on these phones now that basically allow them to go in and get pretty much everything they need in terms of, you know, whatever they, whatever's on the table for them wherever they land. So the cell phone has become incredibly disruptive in terms of its not just its technological um, use, but the widespread application that has become part of the cell phone now. And then, of course, we go into the dystopic, you know, trajectory of the cell phone, and that takes us into things like digital identification, social credit scores, all the things that are locked in that black box and that everybody would theoretically need in order to either transact or identify themselves, and have some kind of biometric marker, right? So the potential for it to become even more disruptive in a negative way is, it's clearly built into the box, right? And when you look at a cell phone, it looks like a black cube. It looks like this black mirror, and on the other side of that black mirror is, the sort of the digital wetware of other domains and other realms, whether it's somebody from Nigeria or who knows what else, right? That leaks through the electrical currents and charges of this realm. But I think that we're at a time where if we're going to have a technological explosion, it's going to be soon because Uranus is moving into Gemini next year, and we have Pluto in Aquarius already. And the first thing they're going to do is they're going to lock into each other. We're going to have a sextile with Uranus and Pluto, the two air signs that are incredibly inventive. And of course, I think there's going to be some social innovation that could be really dystopic, really, really dystopic. But on the other hand, uh, and I've always thought this, right? Like they could theoretically handle or take down one or two or maybe three geniuses that have cracked the energetic code, right? Like they could take down one or two or three, but how would they deal with thousands if all of a sudden thousands of people were being innovative and working together in pods or groups to share information and ideas? Then they wouldn't be able to keep it under control, right? They would not be able to keep it under control because there would be far too many people. And then the whole idea of the technology would be that it would be ubiquitous and there wouldn't be any start point or end point. It would exist and everybody would have access to it. And this is why they've gone down the electric car route, because it's the most controllable. And I just found this new electric system that they're putting out. What is it? It's called is it called I think it's called Leap, if I'm not mistaken. And we'll take a look at it tonight. And it's supposed to charge your electric car between 5 and 15 minutes. Now just think about that for a second, right? Most electric cars will take, sometimes if you're lucky, maybe about 90 minutes, if you're lucky, or maybe an hour, right? An hour and 10 minutes or something, like an hour and 50. Supposedly, this new electric charging system will get your car charged from between 5 to 15 minutes. And then even the architecture of the charger is very different. It looks like a street lamp, which comes up out of the curb and then comes right down. The arm comes right down and locks right into your EV. And these things could be everywhere, right? Like they could be everywhere. So we're in this, and I think this is what Gemini is going to bring. Is Gemini's going to bring a lot of different options. And so we have the company option, corporate option, or the universal option, which is solar and wind and the EV, right? That is it, right? That is going to be the industry standard. But what if there are things that come along and disrupt the industry standard? I think it's doable. And, this is where Terrence Howard comes into the conversation, whatever you think of Terrence Howard, right? What if Terrence Howard and whatever is, exploding up in his brain, what if somebody else hears Terrence Howard and starts to run with Terrence Howard's ideas or Terrence Howard's theorems, right? And then somebody's out, kind of Terrence Howarding Terrence Howard, right? So this is how things start, right? This is how the momentum begins. And, look, whatever you think of the guy, I think it's great. I'm glad we're having a conversation about it. I don't know enough, high physics and high math to say, well, he's right here and he's wrong here. There's a couple things that I think are funny. But it's like, let it out. Let's go. Let's see where it goes. Let's see what he brings to the table. We're going to look at his chart tonight, and we might be able to glean some insight into not just his chart, but some of his historical background, which is, kind of fascinating. So thank you for being here. And we're going to get into it. Let's see who's here. Let's see who we got. Who's in the house? Of course, there's my man DJ MC. What's going on, brother Mike? Double R Raven Rain. Good to see you, Raven. We're glad you're here. Thanks for being here. There she is, the lovely and talented one, Dr. Joan S. If you have any dental needs and you're looking for a biological dentist par excellence, that's your person right there. Come to Austin, have a dental vacation. Neo is here. Happy Sunday, Neo. The magic cat with a K. What's happening? Susie G. Susie G's got a new avatar. Like the new avatar, Susie G. Secret Law 2007. Huzzah, huzzah, huzzah. Sandy D is here. Hey, Sandy. Cash of the Mashup. What's happening? Misbehaving 2. Joining us, there's my man Ryan. I like to say Ryan. The great introspective worker. Jeff Roseanne of Jeff Roseanne Videos. What's happening, JR? Kabuki Theater. My man Bo is in the house. Cheeky Monkey, Amy. What's going on from the left coast? Good to see you. CR User. I used to have that book. I think everybody who was on the New Age circuit had that book. I dated this woman one time who went to one of Drunvalo's Flower of Life overnights, where they all formed a Flower of Life cocoon. I said, really? What was that like? Well, he snuggled up to me and tried to put the moves on me. Imagine that. Imagine that. What's happening, Jake? Good to see you. I hope life is going well in you. By the way, if anybody knows a movie producer, get in touch with this woman. Please. Her book and her story still needs to be a movie. Even if it stars Lizzo. No, I'm just kidding. I would never do that to you. There's my man, Tom Jordan. What's going on, TJ? Maya Rose. What's happening? Derek Reed Walls, the tornado sirens go off here in northern Illinois. Uh-oh. Derek, keep us posted. I hope you get internet down in your tornado cellar so you can give us sort of the Wizard of Oz blow by blow. But there, Logan Grimes. Hell yeah, you are on time, Logan. Secret Law 2000. Tried to find him a year ago. Nowhere to be found. Here he is. Kelly B's here. What's happening, Kelly? Brandy Herrera from hot Bandera, Texas has been hell. The last week, Texas has been hell. It's been hell. Brandy, and you're in Bandera. Bandera is kind of an interesting place. Kind of rough and rugged. Rough and rugged. Hope you're carrying. Let's see. Scott Ann. What's happening, Scott? Good to see you. Let's see. Did I say hi to Secret Law 2007? If not, hi again. Or if I did, hi again. Let's see. Yes, remember that was kind of channeling. I don't believe Indigenous were fans. And she was out. I felt sorry for the girl. I really did. I felt like she was being put up to it. I felt like, and it was mostly Europeans too. You know, it's interesting. The Germans have this love affair with cowboys and Indians. Like the Germans love the whole cowboy thing, but they also love the Native American thing too. So she was doing these things with a lot of German people who really didn't, I don't think really knew much better. Right. It was, it was kind of sad. And I felt like she was being like heavily manipulated and, wasn't good for her. All right. Who else do we have here? Road Trip 1981. What's happening? Peter Bayonne. What's up, brother? W.C. Ray, you're tardy and indifferent. Oh, that's okay. Hey, guess what? Guess what's happening to me? I am getting a new computer. And I've decided, just like Robert F. Kennedy Jr., I'm going to embrace the third party. Although I think they embraced him. We'll talk about him tonight in the Soul Libertarian thing. I have made a commitment to go to Linux. So there's a company out of Denver that actually builds Linux computers. They build their own computer, right? Their own operating system, and it's called POP, P-O-P. And they have a bunch of like apps and stuff that they're building out for their computer. So by the end of the month, Sunday Night AstroLive will be unfettered. Linux City, baby. The only problem is that, YouTube is still linked to Google, right? If you're going to be on YouTube, you have to go through Google. That's the only footprint that I still haven't been able to quite figure out yet. So, but anyway, I'm looking forward to this new computer and learning about Linux and just getting away from Apple and Microsoft. I'm kind of tired of both of them. So that the commercial with the crusher, it turned me off. It just turned me off. And I don't like how Apple has just become so proprietary. You can't work on your own stuff and you can't build out. You can with Linux. Not that I'm a hot rod guy with computers, but Benito is, and I might be able to lean on Benito a little bit and learn my way around beefing up my computer. All right, let's see who we have here. There's my man Steve Thor at the door. What's going on, brother? I'm on the scam side of belief. Okay. I'm not in either way. I'm here to watch the phenomenon. So part of me here, I'll talk more about it when we get there because I do have some thoughts. Let's see. My cherie, Anolani, aloha. What's going on? Good to see you. California Contrarian, better. You're on time. Bowie called Reeves G0 and himself ones and zeros. Reeves Gabriel, Reeves G0. I like Reeves Gabriel. I thought he was a great guitar player. Let's see. Ryan says, yes, if you want to. I didn't put any of these in the show description either. I'll have to do it afterwards. Yes, that's it. You can book a reading with me. Those are the links right there that you'll find over here in the chat. Who else do we have? There is fission, a form of non-polluted nuclear power development at Lawrence Livermore Lab. I lived right down the hill from it. Reeves is an awesome player. He's playing in The Cure now. That really, Reeves Gabrel is in The Cure. That kind of makes sense. That makes sense. He's incredible. I thought David Bowie's played with some amazing guitar players, and he's right up there. That's right, DARPA. DARPA was also there with Lawrence Livermore. Let's see. Who else do we have here? The job. Joe Litke. Hey, Joe, thank you for that. Put your comment up here. Is it going to work? Should. Anyway, Joe says like and subscribe, and I agree with Joe, even though I can't put his comment up. Meow Meow is here. Hi, Meow Meow. This is why I'm getting the new computer. Because I actually had the internet people come over here. And part of it is where I do my stream from. Because the it sucks. All right. Let's see. Who else do we have here? Claire. Yes, the timing, right? Let's get stuck in the mud, honey, in my 4-wheel drive. I like that. I like that. Amy Gill, what's happening? Joe Law Thunderstorm just moved here. Oh, hey, look at that. We got a Rob Chopra sighting. Every time I try to put, there it is. Santos living in Mexico started some kind of program down there. All right. Good to see you, Rob. Hope you're doing all right. Hope you're doing well. And it'd be nice if I can get your comment off my screen. We might have to live with it. This is I'm gonna have to change the comment. Here we go. Let's see. And I'm back. That's right. Whimsical Farm Girl had a tornado up in Wisconsin. I do. It's on the way. It is on the way. It was purchased last week. And how ironic, irritating. Am I right? Totally. It's a Gemini moment. Total Gemini moment. I usually come back. I can't get rid of the comment though. Rob, you may have to live with us. Here. I'm going to refrain from adding comments because that might be an issue moving forward. Let's see. Go out and go back in, choppy connection. All right. Why don't we do this? I am going to go out. I'm gonna phase out of time. I'm gonna phase out of time and I'm gonna come back. So hang in there, don't go away. Let's see if we can reboot this thing, get the phase shift unlock, and we'll get this thing going. All right. Usually a little digital enema does pretty well. Moonsprout is here. What's happening, Moonsprout? Good to see you. Anyone see Terrence Howard interview? The dude is a genius. So we are going to discuss his chart and to see what's going on behind the screen with Terrence Howard. Man, the internet really sucks tonight. I sound like a fucking broken record, but it's true. Okay, why don't we get going? Hi, Dave Sullivan. Good to see you. Is Terrence inventing new math? Why don't, let's jump into Terrence chart. Let's do this. Now, remember, I don't have a birth time for him because, well, I just don't. So what I did is I took a swipe at rectifying his chart. And for those of you who are not familiar with rectification, it is a process where it's fairly intense and you ask a fair amount of questions about a person's life, timing. Sometimes you should probably be looking at secondary progressions and things like that. But I actually enjoy doing rectifications for people who are not clear on their birth time. So we're doing that with Terrence Howard's chart. And as I go through the chart, I'll tell you why and what some of my reasonings are. So let's get into it. Let's get a little Terrence Howard, and then we'll get into some other stuff after that. I don't want that away. Okay. So here we go. Yeah, he's a Pisces, and he's born on 3/11, which is kind of an interesting day if you think about 3/11 as a day. The two most recent events that occurred on 3/11 that have some historical meaning are COVID in 2020. That's the first official day of COVID. And then if you go back to 2011, you have the tidal wave of Fukushima, which some people believe was caused by a deep sea explosion, which caused that massive tidal wave to come in and completely just, drown the Fukushima prefecture, right? I mean, that was pretty fucking dramatic. That was on 3/11. And there were tidal waves that actually hit the west coast of the United States. We felt them. We felt them up in Northern California, like Point Arena, that area. We felt really heavy duty wave action coming in places like Santa Cruz, in the North Coast. They felt it up in Alaska. And I'll tell you, there was a rainstorm that happened about a week after Fukushima that was the most insane rainstorm I had ever experienced. It was something like freaky, like mutant freaky. Why? First of all, it was the size of the raindrops. They were enormous. They weren't your just, little, they were like big fucking globules of rain. And the intensity that these massive raindrops were I wouldn't even call them raindrops. They were like rain bombs were coming down. It freaked me out. I'm like, this has got to be a byproduct of whatever just happened in Fukushima. And if you think about weather front wise, about a week coming across the Pacific Ocean, right? And then mixing with whatever else was in the atmosphere. So we have these two events where one event shuts pretty much the entire planet down, and the other event is seismic and perhaps even nuclear. So 311 is an interesting day to be born, right? All right, so let's take a look at his astrology. So we know that he is a Pisces. Now, I'll tell you why I came up. Now, of course, we could be off a little bit here. This may not even be his rising sign, right? But I chose Cancer rising for a reason. If you look at Terrence Howard and his trajectory with his career, it is very Cancer rising like, right? Like he's popular and then he retreats. He's popular and then he retreats. I mean, he's always been like this. It's like he's on and then off, on and off. So he's very to me, he's very Cancerian rising in a lot of ways. Now we also have a bit of a Leo first house, which would be obviously good for acting. But here's where the anchor in the chart is. So the anchor in the chart is the third house. And if you guys went back or you watched my Star of the Day with Brian Eno, I talked about Uranus in the third house and how people that have Uranus in the third house tend to have a very unique genius. And there tends to be a pattern between people that have Uranus in the third house and patents. And Brian Eno clearly has patents on things he's developed. Terrence Howard's got 70? Like every time he's interviewed, his list of patents grows by at least 20. I shit you not, right? Oh, how many? He's got 90 now? I'm not sure, how that number gets inflated. But originally I heard it was like 25 and 50, and he's got patents. There's a fellow, very bright and vital fellow, friend of the show, lives in San Antonio, Uranus in the third house. He's got patents, right? So I've seen it enough in terms of mundane charts and personal charts. Now, you may have Uranus in the third house. You say, well, I don't have any patents. Hey, it's never too late. So we know that there's going to be original thinking with Uranus in the third house. So this is why I played around a little bit. I played around with his sun in the 12th, sun in the 8th, right? This because there's some hidden stuff. There's some occulted material with Terrence Howard, which I'll get into. But I decided to kind of go with this because right now, with Saturn approaching his sun, what is he doing? He's playing the role of a teacher. I mean, that's kind of how he's coming across, right? He's got the big idea, the very big idea, or the big ideas. So I thought, okay, well, this kind of makes sense. With Saturn starting to activate his sun, it will retreat, right? Saturn goes to 19, goes retrograde to 14. It goes direct 14 in December. And then by next year, in March of next year, it'll be back. That should be the end of February. Saturn will conjunct the sun again. So you may actually see Terrence Howard do a bit of his disappearing act again, right? As Saturn moves away and retreats from his sun, which would not be uncommon for a Cancer rising. But he'll be back. He'll be back because Saturn is going to take another, whack at his sun coming up here. Okay, so this is, if you know anything about his story, when he was young, he says he had a series of dreams. And I think he says right around the age of 2. Right? He claims to remember being in his mother's womb, which, by the way, is not as uncommon as you think. Of all people, Lee Marvin, also an actor, claimed that he remembered being in his mother's womb. So there are people that have that memory, right? And he's one of them. So he has this experience of being I think he's around 2. And he winds up going to this place, like this magical palace, where he is shown all these things from a very young age, right? And when I look at his chart, I I don't think he's lying. I don't think he's lying about that. And I'll tell you why. Because for somebody who doesn't believe in a zero, his true node is at 0 Aries, right? So that's really interesting that his true node is at the very beginning of the zodiac, right? Like it's creating something new, like a new idea, a new direction. So that to me is really interesting. But then you go into the south node down here, right? And that south node is at 0 Libra. Terrence has had some issues in relationships. I mean, let's put that on the table. I think he was somewhere, Lynn, it might have been in your area, maybe Panama or Costa Rica or someplace like that, where, he pulled a Diddy. He's dragging this woman, I guess it was his wife, down the road or something by her hair. Like Terrence has some skeletons in his closet around relationships and anger. And I'm not here to use those events to either discredit his material or discredit his character, right? But it's in his background. And sometimes it's hard to shake what goes on in a person's life, and then the idea of who they become later, right? In some ways there's a weird parallel here with Archaics in some ways in Terrence Howard, right? But with Terrence Howard, like I don't think Terrence Howard went to prison, right? But he did do something that justifiably would take him off a lot of other people's radar because of, and if it had happened in this country, it probably would have been even worse. Okay, so I'm just bringing this up for just some clarification in his relationship history. I think he's been married 3 times. So he's got this south node, right? Now remember, the south node is where we've been before. We've been in the south node before. We know what that's like. That's, our kind of fertile ground in some ways. But we're not supposed to go there in this lifetime. We can have it back here in the background, and it can, sort of drive the north node or the true node, but that's not where we're supposed to be. If you are living your life from the south node, you are literally putting the cart before the horse. And for a lot of people, it's easy, it's familiar. It's like an old pair of shoes, an old, some good worn in soles. But in this lifetime, you're supposed to go to the true north, which is the undiscovered country. And for a lot of people, it can be kind of treacherous, or it feels treacherous because it's unfamiliar. Now, when you have a planet, we've talked about this before, when you have a planet conjuncting that south node, you are bringing that planet and what it represents into the experience of this lifetime. It could be unfinished business, right? Or, hey, look, you are supposed to incorporate this in a way that I guess it's unfinished business, but you're supposed to handle this because you didn't handle it last time. So you're supposed to handle it this time. So what is he bringing back with him? He's bringing Uranus back. And Uranus here is retrograde. And so is his true node. So in a lot of ways, this whole idea of Uranus in his chart would suggest that he already knows this stuff. And that, maybe this very rich dream world that he had was just kind of a refresher course for him in this lifetime, right? So he's bringing Uranus back. And so he has to deal with it, right? He has to. And not only that, but he has Jupiter conjunct Uranus. That's a big idea. These are really big ideas. Whether you believe that he is, a new Tesla, or he's a scammer, or a bullshit artist, or he's somewhere in between, right? It is undeniable and irrefutable with his chart that he is bringing into this lifetime big ideas. Really, really big ideas. And in the third house, right, he would try to go after patents, or he would try to communicate them. And Pluto is there as well. We can't take Pluto out of that conversation. Now, it's in a wide conjunction with the South Node, maybe almost too wide, 7 degrees, but still it's in conjunction. So again, these would be things that would be transformative, right? These would be transformative ideas and cutting edge and very Uranian, right? All right. So what else is going on here? Let's go to the sun. So his sun's at 21 Pisces, which puts it in what decan? The scorpionic decan. So he is going to be part of that wave where, if you're born in that decan, which would be from like the 8th, from the 8th on, your kind of psyche would be very scorpionic on the Piscean side of things. My son is born March 8th, and I can see this in him. Like when he works through something, he has to kind of get to the bottom of it, right? Literally has to kind of bottom out before he can sort of reassemble whatever kind of, path or, labyrinth out of his dark place. And watching him do this over the last 6 months has been very fascinating to see somebody in this decan sort of go through that, right? Like you have to hit bottom in this third decan of Pisces. And then you literally kind of you're part of the like this decan is part of the resurrection. By the time you get out to 28, 29, and then the inevitable 0, right? Now you're into the resurrection decan of Pisces, right? Because it's scorpionic, rebirth. So he has it at 21 degrees. We should take a look at the Sabian symbol for that, but not right now. I don't want to interrupt the flow. And there's that true node at 0 Aries. Look at that. 0 Aries. Like this guy he's literally supposed to be doing what he's doing, right? He is literally supposed to be doing what he's doing right now. Whether or not you believe him, or he's a scammer, or who, maybe, he's part of some major DEI psyop or some, he's a Pisces, right? It's kind of hard to kind of wrap your head around, where he's coming from. My sense is that he's coming from a reasonable or good place, but he spoke in front of a group of people at Oxford. How does that happen? Like, not just anybody speaks at Oxford. You have to be connected, or your ideas have to be so revolutionary that they're going to put you like in front of all these people and have these ideas challenge what I would call classical ideas of physics and math in the universe. Like you're not going to find probably a more traditional setting than a place like Oxford. And sure, there are people who are big thinkers and have the ability to really stretch the paradigm, right? So it's not saying that they're all going to be just inside the box at Oxford. But that's, where this idea of scholarship and, proof of work and all these things would be part of the Western canon, right? So he's there. Now I don't know what his connection was. I don't know who put him there, right? But he's there and he's doing this thing. Now, his true node is all about bringing something new into the world, like pioneering something. So in this regard, I think there's a there with the chart. Okay. Now, what's also interesting is Neptune, because Neptune has been at 29 Pisces and it's hovering over his true node. It's like this cloud of unknowing that's hovering over his true node. Like, what's really going on here? Is he a mystic? Uh, a grifter? Is he a con man? Is he deluded? Right? Is somebody running a program through him? Like, it's really hard to get a handle on it when Neptune is, hovering over his true node. Not only that, but it's only 2 degrees off his Chiron. And where's his Chiron? 2, right? And when did he theoretically start having these dreams where he was taken into this magical place and, these beings showed him how all these things worked? Around 2, right? And now, again, we don't know who they were. For all we know, it could have been a government program. I mean, we're talking about Aries here, right? I have to take that into account when I see Aries. So, could Terrence Howard have been like, one of Emily's project kids? Maybe. He may have been, right? In that whole dream world that he had in his brain, maybe he was really in those places, right? Maybe that's what was really going on, because that's where his Chiron, and it's in Aries. When we deal with Aries, we're dealing with the military. Now, keep this in mind. The military keeps very close tabs on extremely smart people. Somebody like Terrence Howard, who could be extremely smart. Look, his Mercury is at 28 Aquarius. He's smart, right? He's a bright guy. Mercury and Aquarius is really brilliant, right? And he's got this sextile going on with the moon. So moon Mercury sextiles are very interesting, particularly since his moon is right down here at 27 Sagittarius. Now, what is that near? That's near the galactic center. So his moon is conjunct the galactic center. He's getting some kind of information, right? He's getting some kind of information. And when you have like the moon in a really interesting position in your chart, it can act as an intuitive accelerator in a lot of ways, right? So I'll give you an example in my chart. So in my chart, I have a moon Mercury conjunction, and they're separated by like 1 degree. And there are times when, and I know a lot of you have this too, so I don't feel like I'm just saying, well, get this conjunction, I'm really special. But there are times when I feel like I'm being led or guided down certain rabbit holes with that moon Mercury conjunction. Like my intuition is taking me into places where it's like, oh, look at this. Look at this. Like I was talking with Miriam Hanane on Twitter, like before the show. And, I said, I don't know if you know about this, but I did some research into the Aspen Institute of Ideas that happened in 2019. And when I went into the attendee list, I was shocked and surprised to find a number of people from the Minnesota area, Minneapolis, St. Paul, and the surrounding area. And they were all there, like on scholarship, to be part of this Aspen Institute of Ideas. And they weren't really theoretically, quote unquote, important people. Some of them were like councilmen or, councilwoman. Some of them had some NGO or nonprofit, but they were all linked in a way to a very specific area, which was Minneapolis and St. Paul and the surrounding area. And I thought, why are these people from this one area getting these scholarships to go to the Aspen Institute of Ideas? And then I looked through the list of attendees, and one of the attendees was Alicia Garza of Black Lives Matter. And I'm like, oh, this is it. And then I've done shows on that Aspen Institute of Ideas. When you put all the information together, you see 2020. You see what happens in 2020, right? So I don't know what led me to go and look at that particular meeting of the Aspen Institute of Ideas and to see who attended, right? It was just a hunch that I had. And then once I went in there, it was like, holy shit. To me, it's like the nuts and bolts of 2020 are all being put together, in real time, in Aspen, where they're all sharing this space together, right? So that's what happens when you have an interesting connection with Mercury and the moon, right? There's this interesting, like, shared space between being analytical and being intuitive. And he's got it, right? It's not just any space of the moon, right? It is conjunct the galactic center, which is at late 25, early 26, I think it's at now, in Sagittarius. So there's that sextile. Boom, it's right there. And then he's got this sextile with Venus and Saturn with Mercury. And I think in some ways that relates to the whole Oxford thing. And it's like, oh, well, let's take him seriously. And again, I'm playing with this chart as a rectified chart. So that would actually make sense with Saturn in the 10th house, right? That he would, go before these authorities and, present his ideas. So he's bright, right? But now let's go down here with that Mercury Neptune square. And how many times have I talked about how the Mercury Neptune square can really play fast and loose with the truth? Okay. It's you look at any astrological definition of a Mercury Neptune square, and at a certain point along the way, you are going to run into the word lie or liar, right? With that square, I guarantee you, right? In 90% of the time, you look at that. Now, for some people, it could be, and I've said this before, because you may have a Mercury Neptune square and you may be an honest person, right? But there are things with a Mercury Neptune square where you may not always be honest with yourself. That's, you may say, okay, well, I'll meet you at such and such at 6:00, and I promise that I'll bring, whatever it is that we agree upon. And they say, okay, fine, great. And you do that. Or if you borrow something from somebody and you say, I promise I'll pay you back. And you mean that, right? That I'll pay you back. With the Mercury Neptune square, sometimes that gets a little loose, right? You intend to do the thing. You're not unintending to do the thing, but somewhere along the way, you either get sidetracked or something happens. And then the next thing you know, you're not being truthful with yourself. You're like, oh, I was supposed to do that. Or I had made this promise and I didn't do this promise, right? So you may not necessarily lie outwardly, but you may not always be truthful to yourself with a Mercury Neptune square. The other thing with Mercury Neptune squares is that you could be also vulnerable to other people's lies, right? You could be gullible with the Mercury Neptune square. And somebody says, oh, yeah, I'll pay you back. You can trust me. Like, oh, yeah, great. I can trust you. And, 5 years later, you're still waiting to be paid back. That's the other side of a Mercury Neptune square. is that sometimes it's coming at you from another person in another direction. And then lastly, with a Mercury Neptune square, is that sometimes we can overpromise things. We say, oh, yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. I'll give you an interesting example of this for Terrence Howard's chart. Um, Apparently, when the Iron Man film was starting, they did not want Robert Downey Jr. to play Iron Man. They had somebody else in mind. I forget who it was. And Terrence Howard had already signed on to play the role of the other guy with the Iron Man suit that was eventually played by Don Cheadle. So Terrence Howard's in the first Iron Man movie. According to Terrence Howard, Robert Downey Jr. had a pretty bad reputation at the time that they were starting to film the Iron Man series. And they could not get a bond on him for the film, meaning that if, he got wasted or drunk or something happened and he couldn't finish shooting, right, that, it would suck, right? So when you have an actor like that who has a bit of a checkered past, they have to take out a bond so that the actor is insured and that the company, if they have to release him at some point during shooting, gets that money back, right? They get their investment back. So according to Terrence Howard, they were giving him $4.5 million to be in Iron Man. And he was friends with Robert Downey Jr. And he wanted Robert Downey Jr. to play Iron Man. And again, the producer, the executive producer of the film, brought up the fact that he was not bankable because he was kind of flaky. I think he was going through some of his addiction issues. So Terrence Howard said, "Okay, shave $1 million off of my salary. I'll take $3.5 million. You take $1 million, and you bond him." And that's what they did. That's what they did. So again, this is all according to Terrence Howard. Iron Man 2 rolls around, and they want to pay Terrence Howard $1 million for Iron Man 2. Now, theoretically, he already made $3.5 million for Iron Man 1, which was a hit. So why would he take $1 million? And now Robert Downey Jr. is locked in as Iron Man, right? And he said that he kept trying to get a hold of Robert Downey Jr., and Robert Downey Jr. was not available, right? He was now shooting Sherlock Holmes. So he did not, he didn't, again, this is according to Terrence Howard. He didn't stand up for Terrence Howard and said, "Hey man, you did me a solid. I'm going to do you a solid," and say, "Yeah, I'll lop off, maybe $1 million of my salary or $1.5 million. It's a payback," right? Now, there are people who will say that he wanted more money than Robert Downey Jr. So again, what's the truth here? With a Mercury Neptune square, are you really going to find the truth? So again, according to Terrence Howard, they're at some kind of award ceremony, and by that time, he's kind of back on his feet. He's doing Empire, and they saw each other, and Robert Downey Jr., who I think is an Aquarian, by the way, if I'm not mistaken. He basically said, "Well, hey, you landed on your feet anyway, so congratulations," right? Meaning that even though he wasn't part of the MCU from that point forward, he had a really successful show on Fox with Empire, which I never watched, but I heard it was very successful. But that's your Mercury Neptune square, right? I just gave you an example. Like he, again, gave Robert Downey Jr. $1 million of his salary so he could be bonded and get the role. And then again, according to him, when it came time for Robert Downey Jr. to maybe take a stand for him, He wasn't there. But then again, we read these rumors that he wanted more money. So take it with a grain of salt. That's your Mercury Neptune square. Is he telling the truth? That's another part of this. Is he telling the truth with the Mercury Neptune square? Well, he's got that trine, that sextile with the moon, and that sextile with Venus and Saturn. So some of it's got to have some traction, right? Some of it's got to have some proof of work. But, how much is there? And how much are people willing to buy? This is the other part of it. So last week, if you joined us last week, I talked about Robespierre. And Robespierre has a Mars-Neptune conjunction in the sign of Leo in his chart. And I looked at it and go, oh, that's interesting. Mars-Neptune. Okay, I wonder if this is like the sign of a leader or a dictator or a cult follower, right? Well, guess who else has a Mars-Neptune conjunction? Napoleon. It's in Virgo. And it's really interesting because if you follow the astrology, Robespierre predates Napoleon. It's Mars Leo. Napoleon sees what Robespierre has done wrong. He perfects it with Mars and Neptune in Virgo. It's like, oh, look at that shit. What's his name? Vladimir Ilyich Lenin. Mars Neptune in Sagittarius. And I could be wrong here, but I'm pretty sure I'm on the money. I think Jim Jones has a Mars Neptune conjunction, right? I think he's got one too. So there are 4 quote unquote, like almost dictators and cult leaders with this Mars Neptune conjunction. And look what we have here. And I'm not saying that he is a cult leader, but and he does have a Mars Neptune conjunction, even though they're out of sign, right? We just go down here. There's Neptune. We go across. There's the sign for conjunction. We take the elevator up. There's Mars. So what you get with Mars Neptune conjunctions are charismatic people, people that can sway other people. And his Mars is in Sagittarius and his Neptune is retrograde in Scorpio. So Mars in Sagittarius, going beyond where no man has gone before, right? It's at 6 degrees. What's it doing? We actually have a trine with Chiron. We've got a Y trine with his true node. And boom, over there, sextile Jupiter, sextile Uranus. The dude's a trailblazer. Whatever you think of him, he's got trailblazer energy. He also has kind of culty energy too. Now, remember, he was also in that movie Hustle and Flow, where he plays a pimp, right? And what is a pimp really? A pimp is kind of the leader of a cult, right? There's a cult of women that follow the pimp. And, he's great in Hustle and Flow, by the way. He's amazing in that movie. Whoop that trick. Whoop that trick. Whoop that trick. And he's got, what's his name? Anthony Edwards, whatever the guy's name is. Right. And he's got that skinny white guy from Road Trip. He's in that movie. It's a good movie. Hustle and Flow is a good movie. But, he's playing that role, right? He's playing that role. So he's got that kind of charismatic sheen easily with Mars Neptune, even though they're in different signs, they're conjunct. And we're going to take the vertex out of it because that's all based on position of the chart and the rising sign. And we don't know if this is his rising sign. We're just taking a crack at it in terms of rectification. But he does have Pallas and he does have Juno in Capricorn. And what is Pallas? It's about pattern recognition. And what is Capricorn? It's all about time, right? Time. It's time, Saturn. And it's the old. And with Juno, it is what? The new, right? So he is theoretically bringing something into the world that is new based on what he can recognize in terms of patterns. right? So that to me is pretty fascinating. Pretty fascinating. He's got Jupiter squaring his moon. Is that right? Yep. Jupiter square moon, Uranus square moon. So Jupiter square moon could be, especially in Sagittarius, really exaggerated. Really exaggerated. Like so exaggerated that it's like, this is way too big for me to wrap my head around. And then the Uranus moon square, to me, that is more along the lines of how he deals with relationships and his emotions. This guy has a temper. I can tell you that right now. He's got a temper. He's tightly wound. Maybe he's kind of uncoiled some of this, but that Uranus moon square is really explosive. Really, really explosive. And I think that he's been in this position where he just goes into this zone, right? And just starts, and Rogan's just sitting there kind of drooling, right? And I think that's kind of this Mars Neptune conjunction, quite honestly. And what else is Mars doing? Well, it's sextiling Pluto, right? Again, that's driving the big idea. It's sextiling Uranus. So he is going to push the curve. Whatever you think of the ideas, he's going to push the curve. He may be completely full of shit, or he may reconnect us with Aether. Who knows? Maybe Terrence Howard's the fucking Antichrist. I don't know, right? But his chart is interesting because of this true node at 0 Aries, and that Chiron at 2, and the South Node at 2, and Uranus, Jupiter at 2. And it's the age of 2 where he claims that he was taken into the dream space and shown all these things. It's in the chart. Now, whether or not that's some kind of hyperdimensional realm or he's a project kid, I don't know. Right? I'd have to dig deeper with Terrence Howard. I'll share with you a story about somebody that I knew. And this was back in the Bay Area. And this was, I used to work at this magazine called Mondo 2000. And were a bunch of like cyber hackers and body hackers and biohackers. Like, it was way ahead of the curve. So I got there towards the end and I was hanging out with these people and I was trying to keep the magazine alive. And so there would be people that would come through that portal. I met some very interesting people. And there was this one guy who had an electronic music label, and it was his own. And he was this really smart software guy in the Valley, like really fucking smart. And he was, I guess he was in his 20s. He might have been around maybe 26 when I met him. And I think I was in my late 30s. So I was hanging out with this guy, and he was really fucking smart. And he grew up in New Mexico, and his father worked on missile guidance systems, and his mother was a computer scientist. And I'm thinking about, one night we're hanging out. We're in Palo Alto, and we were hanging out. And I asked him this question. I said, "So how much of your childhood do you remember?" And he looked at me. It's like, "What? How much of your childhood do you remember?" He said, why are you asking me that? I said, "Because I'm curious." He said, "I don't have any memory of my childhood." I said, "Oh, that's what I thought." And he was like, "What the fuck? Why?" Right? So I started talking to him about it. I said, "Well, my instincts tell me that you were part of some kind of project, and that there's a reason why you don't have any memory." His memories really start him around 9 years old. And I know that there are people out there that have something very similar. They don't really remember a lot of their childhood. But once I told him that, he got really flipped out, right? And we still remain friends. And again, a very bright guy. And I really liked him. And I remember one time we went to go see this group, the Crystal Method, right? You guys know what the Crystal Method is, right? Well, he was definitely jamming with the crystal method that night, if you know what I mean, right? He was that kind of bright, like, really like electrified. And he settled down and he got married and, he had a kid and super nice guy. It's been a long time since I talked to him. But that's what I'm talking about. He had no memory whatsoever. And he grew up, essentially, on or near an installation in New Mexico where there's a lot of crazy things. So could Terrence Howard be in that territory? Quite possibly. I wouldn't rule it out. I'd have to look into his background a bit more. I know he's from Chicago, and I think he has a pretty basic background from what I can tell, but you never know, right? Like you really never know how people's signatures are read. They could just go, like fucking, Dr. Professor X, right? And they have these image, these machines that can basically pick up on spectral fields in the aura. Literally, I'm sure they can do this. And they'll see somebody who is emitting like a spectral field that is really interesting. And then they'll kind of hone in on that, right? And they'll sort of geolocate that spectral imaging, and they'll find out who that person is. And then that person will be a person of interest. And they'll follow them around. They'll find out what their records are in school, what their parents do, right? And sometimes they get them in accelerated programs, which is the easiest way to begin to access them. Or in other instances, they may go and do something completely different. They may, they may stage an alien abduction. Like it's not uncommon, I think, for some of these people to believe that they've been on craft when they've really been. And I'm not saying that they haven't been, right? But I think that's another reality, or that's another version of these programs. So they come into this world and they think that they're, being connected to, and maybe they are. Maybe it's a joint venture program, right? Maybe that's happening as well. But I think that's what happens. And maybe Terrence Howard is one of these people who emits that kind of spectral imaging and that signal. It's like, here we go. We got one. Just like the X-Men. Boom. Right. And then at the age of 2, whether or not it's his dream life or his dream world, he's coming through, or this kind of military thing, something is happening to him. And with the moon square to the sun, I would say that that's a really difficult aspect to have in life in general, because the sun represents like who you are and how you move about this realm. And the moon in square with the sun makes it difficult. You have an emotional body that you're at odds with. Your upbringing, you may be at odds with. Your household, you may be at odds with. Your roots, you may be at odds with. So that can be a real challenge with the sun moon square. And then you have to figure out what emotions are yours. And sometimes, again, with these squares, there can be really violent discharges, so that you can try to somehow approximate what's your emotional signal, what belongs to you versus somebody else, right? Or with the moon, which you've inherited. So he's, and then he's got that square with Chiron. And he went through his Chiron return in 2019. I guarantee you go back to 2019 and try and track Terrence Howard. And that's the beginning. That's the genesis of when he started all this, going through the Chiron return. So now he's on the other side of it. Now, what's going to happen when Saturn and Neptune hit his true node? Well, look out, Jack. That's going to be interesting as hell, right? He's got a Saturn and Neptune on his true node. Like, could Terrence Howard deliver us to like free energy, aether land? Is he the missing link between us and the previous resets? I mean, it's interesting to think about, right? It's very interesting to think about. At least I think it's interesting. Could he be the Antichrist? Maybe he's that too. Looks a little evil at times. He's got that kind of evil glint in his eye. But I think he's interesting. I think the chart is extremely interesting. And I think there's a there. Let's talk about Venus Saturn. He's got that Venus-Saturn conjunction. He's got Chiron coming up on Saturn. There are going to be people that are, it's going to be twofold for Terrence Howard. There are going to be people that are going to go hard at him and, really hardcore debunk him, right? Then you're going to have other people who are going to want to promote and support Terrence Howard at the same time with Chiron here. And now here's Mars. Mars is coming into the mix. And what are we doing? We're talking about him, right? We're talking about, and he's going to have his nodal return. His nodal return will be at the end of 2025. And that's the same time where Saturn and Neptune are all gathered together. So this guy's not going away. He is not going away. He's on the map. He's on the radar. And he's going to continue to, bring a lot of this stuff forward. Now, some of it can be found in the work of other people, right? Like he is certainly piggybacking on the work of other people. So it's not like this is all pure Terrence Howard, but I think he's filling in some of the bits that are part of the missing pieces, right? That are all part of this. So he's not going away, and he's going to have his Saturn return in 3 years. It'll be an interesting Saturn return for this guy. And again, I don't know if it's in his 10th house. Again, this is a rectified chart, and I rectified it based on, all this going down in his 3rd house. All right, so whether or not Venus and Saturn are in the 10th house or some other house, he's got a yod. So let's take a look at the yod. So it's Neptune at 28, right, coming in and yachting off with Venus. And then Pluto is yachting with Venus and Saturn. So these are sextiles, right? Pluto, Neptune, sextile. And then here we have the inconjunct, right? So this is the inconjunct that I find the most interesting is the Pluto inconjunct with Saturn, because this is like a program on the back end, and Saturn is authority. Now, what's fascinating is that he got an incredible amount of attention on Joe Rogan's podcast, right? So that's a Venus-Saturn conjunction. Venus is going to be about relating one-on-one. Joe Rogan, probably at the top of the list in terms of eyeballs on the internet. Maybe Tucker Carlson sneaking in a close second, right? So we can see this. Joe Rogan, by the way, is also an MMA guy, right? And MMA is all about martial arts and, being physical, right? And fighting, which is very Aries. So it would make sense that Terrence Howard would he'd been making some waves recently, but he really popped on Rogan, right? He really popped on Rogan. And it's that Venus-Saturn conjunction. So when he is in dialogue with another person, that's when the yod comes out, right? That's when the yod is released. When he is in dialogue with another person, that's when his authority can sort of naturally, proliferate and, take up space in the room. This is a very interesting chart. Not a lot of water. We'll take the ascendant out of it because we don't know really if that's his ascendant or not. I'm just going to assume that based on the 3rd house, that it is. And he's playing the role of the teacher now with Saturn, the sun in the 9th house. But he's got Neptune and he's got the sun, and that's it. So he doesn't have a ton of water. He does have a lot of fire, a lot of air, and a lot of earth. And I would say the air fire component is very strong in his chart. Like it's combustible. It's fuel. It's when the air meets the gas inside the piston, and it's the explosion. and it fires the vehicle. Let's take a look at his Sabian symbol for 21 Pisces. Let's take a look at that. This is an interesting symbol, a very interesting symbol. Let me just go. Let's see. What is it? Okay. All right. So in the Sabian symbols, usually how these things work is you look at the symbol that the actual degree is at, you look at the one before it, and you look at the one after it. And you really want to place the emphasis on the one that it's at and then where it's headed to. Right. So it's a trinity of the three symbols. And when I was friends with Linda Hill, who was for a long time sort of the preeminent modern person with Sabian symbols, I asked her about this because I was noticing that these symbols were basically tranched together in threes. And I said, so I asked her, when you have the three symbols, do you look at the one prior, the one that it's at, and then the one that it's moving towards? She said, yes. And when I got into Dane Rudyer and his interpretation of the symbols, he said the same thing. All right, so let's do this. Let me put this up here and change browsers. And I'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so we're going to look at Pisces 21. We know it's Pisces 21. The prior symbol is a table set for an evening meal, an indication that in the end and at the appointed time, the individual's needs will be met among those to whom he is linked by spiritual or biological web of energies, right? So this is kind of the predecessor of his own symbol here at 21, which is fascinating. Pisces 21, under the watchful and kind eye of a Chinese servant, a girl fondles a little white lamb. So this is what Rudyer says. Growth in consciousness in its earliest tactile awareness of the wonders of unsophisticated living. This symbol recalls the one for phase 174, Virgo 24, which is, I believe, his Pluto. We'll have to check on that. Mary and her little lamb. But it occupies a different position in the fivefold sequence. And a new factor is added, the Chinese servant. When you look at Terrence Howard, he looks kind of Asian. Have you noticed that? When we're done with this, I'm going to show you some pictures of Terrence Howard. He looks slightly Asian. And I don't know where that is coming from in his family, his DNA, whether it's a multidimensional thing, right? But I was noticing that tonight. I said, this guy looks a little Asian. All right, let me keep going here. According to the occult tradition, the original Chinese race was an extension of the humanity or root race preceding ours. Thus, the stress upon the biological factors of family and ancestors, and also on the dualism of the yang and yin interplay. The Chinese servant represents the past as a servant of the new evolution. The white lamb suggests the sign of all beginnings, Aries, and he's got true node Aries at 0, although he would never say it's 0. The new evolution is just about to begin during the late Pisces phase of the year cycle. It is yet an ideal, a white loveliness. The girl discovers the new feeling of the touch of wool, of animal warmth. The preceding fivefold sequence began with a symbol suggesting the inspiring revelation of new truths or facts which the creative person is seeking to formulate. Now we witness another kind of discovery, a sensuously emotional discovery, perhaps a presentiment of the mother feeling. This is the first symbol of the 71st sequence. It brings together past and future in overlapping of levels. The Chinese kindly watching the white girl, the fondling of the white lamb. There is charm and ingenuousness in the scene, a vision of white hope, a hope for the future or for a future that can only be felt almost naively. Okay, think about that sentence for a second, right? If you're sitting around watching Terrence Howard and he's going through all this stuff, and we're living in a universe where the smartest fucking guy in the room is supposed to be Bill Gates, and all he's talking about is, making plague-borne mosquitoes and then, coloring the sky charcoal gray, right? And then you're listening to this guy, like, where's your head gonna go? You're like, whoa, this is interesting. A lot more interesting than that guy. That's for damn sure, right? And I've seen this on Twitter where people who have been following some of these ideas that Terrence Howard has been promoting, because they're not just his ideas. There are people who have been talking about this, and they are looking at him and thanking their lucky stars that somebody has come along and has given these ideas a voice, right? And they're all in. There's a guy on Twitter, very popular Twitter account called Cymatic Jewel, Joule. He is Terrence Howard's biggest fucking cheerleader, right? And when you go through his Twitter feed, there's almost a naivete in some ways that Terrence Howard has become uh, the vox populi for ideas that he's been trying to get across for a very long time, but does not have the platform for. But there was this one Twitter exchange that he had with this dude, and this guy was talking about the concept of zero, right? And when you talk about zero, the idea is that there is no such thing as zero because energy never goes away, right? It can't be created and it can't be destroyed. It's just there. And so when it goes to zero, it's just going to some other place, right? It's not that it doesn't exist anymore. It's just a new thing or a different thing. So he's, going through this on Twitter, and this guy said, okay, how many handfuls of gazpacho do I have in each wrist? And I thought, each fist. I thought, well, that's pretty fucking clever, right? And so what does this guy do? He starts talking about the Federal Reserve and slavery and zeros and ones and the binary system. And for everything that he could put forth as an argument to support Terrence Howard's ideas in that one Twitter exchange, he lost it. He lost it. It was almost naive, right? It's like he wants to believe so much that this guy is a carrier of his ideas or other people like his. He is willing to not engage at a certain level and then talk about something ideological to prove a point. That's what I'm talking about, right? So this is his degree, Pisces 21. And so there are people who may embrace this with a purity and an innocence. Now, if you look at him when he's on Rogan, and you can see him in the thumbnail, he's wearing this white hood, right? He's wearing this white hoodie, and he has the headphones on. Why is he wearing the white hoodie? That's where my mind goes. And so when I see the white hoodie, it's almost like the head or the coat of a sheep on his head or a lamb on his head. Let me show you. So I can find it. if you haven't seen it. So this is what I'm talking about, right? And he's got his math shirt on. Now, he's wearing this. I don't know when he puts this on, but then he's also wearing this, right? So he's wearing two things. He's wearing this hoodie, and then he's wearing basically two hoodies. And I think this one's got equations and all kinds of shit. But to me, this is symbolic of like the white lamb, right? Now, there's another, if we go to the next symbol, which is 22, a prophet carrying tablets of the new law is walking down the slopes of Mount Sinai. So remember, you got to look at the next symbol over. The need to bring down to the level of everyday existence the clear realization made manifest in peak experience. So whatever you think of Moses, the Moses story, just put it aside for now and just take it as a part of the symbol. The symbol obviously refers to Moses after received from the God of his people the basic principles upon which a new religion and even more a new ritual of living should be founded. The basic law has to be brought down. It represents a descent of formative and structuring power, a divine revelation. This type of revealed knowledge contrasts with the kind of knowing born out of the experience of touch, of feeling, of warmth, of contact. This is the second stage symbol. This second stage symbol pictures a process to which a religious God-given character has been attributed in the past, but which today is being investigated at the personal and psychological level. The important point here is, what do you do after you have a peak experience and inner revelation? The keyword mandate is appropriate, but the basic problem is how to fulfill it in the right spirit. So again, what we see here in terms of his attire, right? He's almost looking like, a prophet with sort of the white garment and the white hood and, everything that kind of goes along. It also comes very close to the Chinese servant and Mary and the Lamb. And tell me if I'm not wrong here, that freaking Terrence Howard doesn't look Asian, right? He looks Asian. There is something going on with this guy, right? He is not, and like he comes from Chicago, working class family. He looks Asian to me. He kind of has a bit of the Elon Musk sort of vibe, right? Elon Musk has that kind of Asiatic look about him. But you can really see it. Apparently, John Rich thinks Terrence Howard is crazy. So there are a lot of people that do, right? So there's something interesting about his background. Let me just see here. Let's do a quick wiki on Terrence Howard. His upbringing is rather, in some ways, unremarkable, to be honest. So let's just do this really quickly. When I said remarkable, I mean it in the sense that there's other than his own narrative, right? So this is the Wikipedia version. Howard was born in Chicago, Illinois, on March 11th, 1969, to Tyrone and Anita Nee Williams. Howard, who were both of African and English ancestry. His great-grandmother was actress Minnie Gentry. Howard was raised in Cleveland, Ohio, where he had a rocky childhood. He endured beatings from his physically abusive father. That could be your Chiron and Aries, by the way. And saw his father stabbing another man in the Santa line slaying when he was 2 years old. Right? There's his Chiron right there. His father was convicted of manslaughter and served 11 months in jail. Howard's parents divorced upon his father's release. He was raised by his great-grandmother. She died at the age of 77 on May 11th. The Santa line slaying. It's a nationally publicized event that occurred on December 21st, 1971 in Cleveland, Ohio. The incident resulted in the death of one man, Jack Fitzpatrick. Tyrone Howard was convicted of manslaughter and served 11 months in prison. In 2005, the incident attracted some attention again when it was revealed that Tyrone Howard is the father of actor Terrence Howard, who witnessed the incident as a young boy. Terrence Howard gave an interview on Oprah about the incident, but his account of what happened was later contradicted by his father, who accused him of lying to garner publicity for his own career. A 21-year-old Tyrone Howard and his pregnant wife took their 3 sons, one of whom was 2-year-old Terrence. There's your chirotic crisis at 2. To see Santa Claus at Higgy's department store in Cleveland, Ohio's public square. Also waiting in the long line was 36-year-old Jack Fitzpatrick, who was with 3 of his own children, while his pregnant wife shopped with their oldest daughter. At one point, the Howards were accused of cutting in the line by some of the others waiting, including Fitzpatrick. An argument began between the 2 men. What was said in the argument and who initiated the altercation differs among witnesses, but the result was Fitzpatrick grabbed Howard, pinned him against the wall, and kneed him in the groin. Howard's groin began bleeding from the previous injury he had in the job. Howard then used a sharp object to stab Fitzpatrick several times in the thighs and neck until Fitzpatrick fell to the floor. Howard fled to his mother's home. Hours later, he turned himself into police. Fitzpatrick was taken to a nearby hospital and died from his wounds. The incident made headlines in the local Cleveland newspapers, who called the incident the Santa line slaying. It was also widely reported in newspapers around the country. The local newspapers reported the altercation as racially motivated due to Fitzpatrick being white and Howard being black. Some witnesses claimed that racial slurs were used by Fitzpatrick. It was also reported that the weapon Howard used was a knife, which he had in his jacket. Cleveland's then mayor, Ralph Perk, publicly denounced Howard as a murderer. The Episcopal Bishop of Howard called the slaying an atrocity and compared it to the biblical story of Herod the Great's massacre of the innocents. Howard was charged with second-degree murder and pleaded self-defense. Fitzpatrick's alleged use of racial epithets was denied by Howard's wife in the resulting trial. But she did testify that doing things like this has set your race back 5 years. Howard testified that he angrily cursed at Fitzpatrick, and that led to the altercation. The widow, Mary Fitzpatrick, testified the security guard separated the 2 men during the scuffle, but Howard then pulled a knife from his jacket and lunged at Fitzpatrick with it. Howard and witnesses testified that while Howard was pinned against the wall, a woman handed him a nail file, which he used to stab Fitzpatrick. But the nail file was never recovered, and the unidentified woman never came forward. According to the jury foreman, Jack Petro, the issue of race did not come up as a factor in the jury room. After a long deliberation, Howard was convicted of manslaughter and received a sentence of 1 to 25 years of prison. After 11 months, Howard was paroled for good behavior. Howard had no previous criminal record before the incident. He and his wife shortly divorced after his release. So his account, Terrence's, is different. And let's see. While promoting the film Crash on the Oprah Winfrey Show, Terrence Howard spoke about his father's involvement in the Santa line slaying. It was the first time he publicly spoke of the incident. As the cast of the film discussed racism in American society, Howard gave an emotional account of the altercation, which he claimed was racially motivated. In Terrence Howard's telling, when he and his mother joined the line, Fitzpatrick assumed Tyrone, whose complexion was much lighter than the other Howards, was Caucasian, and asked him, "Why did you let those ends cut you?" Howard said that his father told Fitzpatrick they were his wife and kids and turned around. Terrence claimed that Fitzpatrick then grabbed his father by the throat and pinned him to the wall. He claimed that Fitzpatrick was 6'4", while his father stood only 5'8". Tyrone was invited to appear on the program with Terrence, but refused. Shortly after Terrence's account of the incident, Tyrone gave an interview to the Cleveland newspaper, The Plain Dealer, which he claims that his son misrepresented his story and maintained that the altercation was not racially motivated. It was nothing racial that went down. It was two men standing there, both of us acting like damn fools, instead of one of us taking the man's role and walking away. According to Howard, his interview after standing in a long line for 30 minutes, he told his pregnant wife to take Terrence and find a place to sit down. Approximately 45 minutes later, Howard and his sons were close to the front of the line. Howard called for his wife and youngest son to join him in the line. Other people waiting in the line, including Fitzpatrick, did not realize the woman entering the line was Howard's wife. Tyrone said of his son's appearance on Oprah, Oprah wanted a sob story. He was there with the sob story. Terrence needed publicity, and I became the meat. I was the feast that day. After Tyrone Howard's revelation, Terrence's account of events was removed from the Oprah website and replaced with a different part of the interview. So according to the Fitzpatricks, Jack did nothing to initiate the altercation and was simply defending himself, though evidence shows he was the initial aggressor. They testified that the Howards cut in the line numerous times, and Jack told them it's not right to sponge in line. Howard's wife and other witnesses also testified that Fitzpatrick said words to that effect. In response to Terrence Howard's statements, Jack's daughter, Peggy, who was 9 years old at the time, maintained in the Plain Dealer that since Fitzpatrick was a seminarian, he was not a man prone to violence. She also denied Terrence Howard's claim of her father's large size, stating that Fitzpatrick was 5'8". She also expressed some admiration for Terrence Howard for overcoming his traumatic childhood to become a successful actor. Holy fucking shit. Holy shit. You got a Mercury-Neptune square, right? We talked about the Mercury-Neptune square. Where is that thing? Right there. Mercury-Neptune square. Man. And then there's that Saturn. There's that Pluto. There's that Pluto. The Pluto in conjunct with Saturn. Saturn the father. Interesting. And then Chiron at 2. That's Chirotic crisis. The Santa line slaying. Fitzpatrick was a seminarian. Wow. All right. So given that Terrence Howard quite possibly lied about his father, and his father refuted his claims, and Terrence Howard was 2. Now, he did remember being in his mother's womb, but Terrence Howard was 2. And he lied about that. Is he telling the truth about what he's sharing now? Question mark. Very interesting. And again, I am not here to smear this guy's character, but he does have a very violent past with women, particularly the mother of one of his kids. Very ugly, right? Can we overcome parts of our past? Absolutely. Absolutely. It can happen, right? Through the grace and love of God and one's own mindfulness and commitment to humbling oneself. You can change your life. You can have a life path change. You can do it. That said, sometimes that residue is pretty sticky, and sometimes it sticks around. And if you can't clean it all up, right, it'll pop back up as black goo. The next thing you know, it's taken over you. There you go. Terrence Howard. A little deconstruction of the chart. Santa. Fucking Santa, man. Fucking Santa. Who killed Mr. Fitzpatrick? It was Santa. Santa killed him. The Santa murders. All right. Where are we? Where are we at? All right. Looks like I'm still on. We're still going, right? That was a rabbit hole, huh? That was a fucking rabbit hole with Terrence Howard. That is a rabbit hole. Tell Robert he should have me on Friday Farcast. I found a dead body on a stone altar on Google Maps, and there's some very creepy stuff in the background. Clearly entities and stuff. It's nuts. So we got Sam's Bland. Where do we find you, Sam? I tried sending to Archaics. Danny, Dawn wrote me back just like it was normal. I'll have you on the show. Why not? All right. Find me on Twitter. I'm on Twitter, AstroPhoenix9. DM me. All right. Wow. Terrence Howard. His story's not over. I'll tell you that right now. We got more Terrence Howard in the future. Maybe not on this show. Okay. So we're in Gemini now, right? Crazy ass Gemini. You guys ready for it? Are you ready for doubles and clones and syncs and weirdness and high strange? We got Pride Month coming. Pride Month, Jupiter and Gemini, sextiling Pluto and Aquarius. There's going to be a lot of fucking pride in the air. So we also have rumblings of China theoretically going after Taiwan, huh? Why don't we take a look at China's chart? Let's see, where are we? Okay. All right. So tomorrow is what? Memorial Day? Isn't that right? So my mother worked for the armed forces all of her life. Her first gig was working at Raritan Arsenal in New Jersey, Fort Monmouth. And then when she moved to California, she got a job with the United States Navy on the civilian side. So she was civilian and contract support for the utilities of the United States Navy and their various and sundry bases up and down the west coast of the United States, from Alaska to Washington to San Diego, Long Beach, right? So she put in, that was her life, that was her gig. You know, that's what allowed her to, find her place in the world and be really good at it. She was very good at her job. Very, very good at her job. 4 planets in Aries. And so, Mom, I salute you. I salute you for all the great work you did. For all the great work you did in helping shutting down these bases. Because that's really what at the end, that's what she did. She transitioned these bases into civilian facilities. That was the final end stage of her gig. And then after that, it was just all kind of clean up and mop up duty. All right, let's take a look at China, shall we? Let's do a little China action. So here's China's chart. It's a very, very top-heavy chart. So this is when, Mao basically did whatever Mao did. Said, this is now the new China, People's Republic of China. October 1st, 1949, 3:15 p.m. This is the chart. And what you'll notice about this chart, again, is the top-heavy nature of it. There's really very little below the line, except the true node in Aries. So China is going through its nodal return, which means it's feeling its oats. Is an attack on Taiwan out of the question? Not at all. Not with this nodal return. When was, let's see, it was what, 1980? Was it 89? Let me see. Let me get in here. Give me 1 sec. Hold on, boys and girls. I'll be there in a second. Oh, come on. Come on. All right. So let me go back to 1989. Okay. So I'm just checking. I'm just checking some coordinates here. Since we're kind of flying a little bit by the seat of our pants. So it is 1989. Tiananmen Square. April 15th. The 4th of June. So April 15th is around what? It's about 20. It's about 20 Aries. All right. Let me just look at this. April 15th. What we're trying to do here is establish the last time China actually used some force. Okay. So we have some precedent here. On April 15th, which is when the Battle of Tiananmen Square happened, the sun was at 25 Aries. However, Jupiter was in Gemini at 6 degrees. The true node is in Pisces at 4. So it's Jupiter in Gemini, and then there's Mars in Gemini. Venus was in Aries conjunct the sun on that day. So this is interesting from the standpoint of China. So there's Jupiter right there, right there. So in 1989, when they had the revolt in the People's Republic of China, Jupiter was, let's see, where's Jupiter right now? It's at 0. So it was 5-6 degrees away from that. So China is now, they've gone through some Jupiter cycles since then, obviously, right? But, and I'd have to go back and then, see what was happening in what would be a 2000 and see, be a 10 would be 99, 2000, 2001. I'd have to go back and see what was happening in 2001 with China, because that was the last time Jupiter was in Gemini there, 2000. And then you'd have to go to 2012 and now 2024. But it's fascinating that here we go, right? When they went after, when the people decided that they wanted freedom, right? They wanted freedom because all this freedom was happening. The wall was falling in Berlin. All these countries, these Iron Curtain countries were being flipped, right? They were just being flipped almost overnight. And you had this group of people in China who said, why not us? Why not us? Maybe it's our turn. Maybe it's our turn to be able to experience, some degree or modicum of freedom. And it's interesting because of Jupiter, right? And you have this thing that splits off with Gemini. So you have the People's Republic, and then you have this other group that was doing their best to establish kind of a new China for themselves. I really feel like the United States needed to do something during that time. Like that was our moment. That was our moment to go in and help those people by any measure possible. Any measure possible. And instead, just kind of turned a blind eye and, they got massacred, right? Now, as it relates to Taiwan, again, we're dealing with this idea of the other. Taiwan like split off, it was like a twin, it was like a zygote that split in half. So, there is this kind of twin relationship with Taiwan and China. And now there's this rumbling that I've heard as soon as June 12th, they're going to go after Taiwan. So astrologically, it kind of makes sense in some ways, with Jupiter down here in the fourth house. And think of Taiwan as being this fraternal body that is apart from China, right? And they're like, hey, we want you back, right? Now, if you're going to do this, if you're China, and they've been talking about this for a long time, if you're China, this is the time you're going to do it. Because number one, we've got, President Potato and whoever's playing him, and he's theoretically running for president, right? Amidst all these scandals that are still brewing around him, including Hunter Biden. There's Ukraine, there's Israel, right? There's all these things going on right now that the United States, we got the border situation. We got a bunch of new people that live here now. A lot of them happen to be Chinese, by the way. So we've got all these things happening. Wouldn't this be like the perfect time for China to say to Taiwan, all right, that's it. We're going to do this. Now, there are some people who will say, well, why do they even need to do it? They have a relationship, right? They do have trade amongst the two countries. So what would be the reason for them to try to take Taiwan back? Well, there's a number of possibilities. Astrologically, with Jupiter in the fourth house, we get this idea of the twinning effect, right? If you look at where Jupiter was when it happened in 1989, opposition with Chiron in Sagittarius. What is Sagittarius about? It's about freedom. It's about freedom. These people wanted freedom. And Chiron's in the 10th house and they're waving their flag. You got the guy doing Tai Chi with the fucking tank, right? And nobody's listening. Nobody's listening. And so swallow it up. And then now we have Taiwan. And it's, again, part of this Gemini field, the fraternal twin of China. And maybe there's something else going on, right? Maybe there's something more than just, trying to take Taiwan back. That it could be currency related. The Chinese have been dumping a lot of their treasury bills. Like they're not going to do it all at once because they don't want the economy to completely collapse because they still want us to buy their shit, right? But they've been doing it over time. So they're dumping these treasury bills. So the whole impetus to go after Taiwan could be to trigger something else completely. Now, I've been on the record that when Pluto hits 6 degrees in Aquarius, China is going to be a different country. Like, I don't think the China that we know today will be the same China that we will know 2 years from now or 3 years from now, because it's also going to be part of this yod with Uranus. And who knows what that's going to look like, right? It could be the end of this version of China, or maybe China tries to flex globally and, sucks up Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the West Coast of the United States, right? And there's a whole new version of China. Right? But China's not going to be the same. It will not be the same country. Let's go with 4 years. 4 years. So what is this, 2024? 2028, it will not be the same. Pluto will have been on the ascendant, will have been part of this yod with Uranus, right? And it could either, they could make a bum rush toward global power, or it could all completely collapse. But it will not be the same. It will not be the same country 5 years from now. Okay. So could this Taiwan piece be a part of it? Absolutely. They're going through their nodal return. We talked about Jupiter, fourth house. And remember, this is a top heavy country, right? So all of their activity is out there, right? It's out in the world. It's really out in the world. And ninth house, when I see Venus in the ninth house, I think of China and Africa. That's what I think of. China and Africa, mining other people's resources, mining other people's, precious metals and all that stuff, right? And Venus is the partnership and the relationship. Like, that's what they do. They don't do regime change. They go in and they build companies. And sometimes they're not too kind with their employees. I've seen how they treat some of the Africans. And they don't have a lot of patience. Okay. And everything about China is behind the scenes. Like, good luck fucking figuring this country out with all of their eighth house Libra stuff. The smile and bow, smile and bow. Oh, yes, yes, yes. Smile and bow. Yes, we'll do these deals. And yes. And even with the moon on the ascendant, it's like very detached. Very detached. As a country, it's so detached. Like, they wanted to run COVID. Like, if it was up for the Chinese, they'd still be fucking running COVID right now. They had people en masse and fumigating their shit for what, a year and a half after COVID was over. And then finally people had enough. They lost their shit. And finally China's like, I guess we should probably end this. There's too many of them right now protesting. And that's exactly what happened. And they were going way overboard. They were locking people in their apartments, and these apartments are being set on fire. Like, it was fucking crazy. That wasn't that long ago. And people had it. So China, with that Aquarian moon, they're just kind of unfazed. Oh, you're a dissident? Get in the van. We're going to the airport. Right? Like, that's the Aquarian moon. We're going to the airport. You know what that means? The old harvesting the organs. So they're very detached with how they deal with their own people and the world. And you don't know what's going on. You do not know what's going on with this country. Now, I believe, you can see this with Jupiter. They're overextended. They went down this whole Belt and Road thing. I think they're way overextended. If the United States loses its purchasing power, which is what's happening, China's kind of fucked, right? They need us to buy their cheap shit. They do. So the only other thing that they could benefit from, instead of buying their cheap shit, just owning us outright, right? Because they're over leveraged. I can tell you that right now on their chart, and knowing a little bit about what I do with Belt and Road, they're totally over leveraged. So they have to change their global stratagem when it comes to money. And maybe it's the BRICS thing. Maybe it's that awkward moment where Xi and Putin hug. Have you ever seen a more fucking awkward hug in your life than between Xi and Putin? You know what that's like? It's like, okay, I'll tell you what it's like. And please, if anybody is offended by this, I apologize. But it's kind of like the fathers of like two gay guys that get married, right? And they agree to go to the wedding. And they're not really maybe all that into it, but it's their sons, right? And their sons, and it's their blood. And they're like, fuck, it's my kid. I gotta love my kid. And then the two fathers have to kind of hug each other, and they kind of, you know what I mean? It was like that. It was like the two fathers of two guys. They got married, and they're like supporting their sons, but it's like, do we hug about this? I don't know. It's kind of awkward. I know it's what are you, father-in-law or mother? What are you? I don't know. Just give me the damn hug. Just give me the damn hug. Let's go have a drink. Right? Like that's what they were like in some ways. Very awkward, but they got a plan now. Those guys got a plan. Let me tell you what, that plan is about this country. It's about BRICS and what they want to do to basically put the coup de grace to the United States of America. That's what they're working on. That's what that hug was about, ultimately. That's my sense. This is a weird chart for a country. I'll tell you that right now. It's a weird chart. And there's a lot of agreements there. Mars, conjunct Pluto, Leo, like they're going to win the negotiation. They're going to win the negotiation. That's what they're about. You know what this reminds me of right here? Do you remember the story when Tony Guitar Sling and Blinken went to Alaska and met with the Xi's right hand and left hand people? Do you remember that? And do you remember what they did when he sat down at the table? They fucking read him the riot act and put him in his fucking place. Like they made him feel about that big. No, he's probably about that big anyway. That's the Mars-Pluto conjunction in the 7th house. Normally, right, with that cool reserved Aquarian moon, they'll be, yeah, hi, yeah, oh, very nice to meet you, Blinken-san. Very nice to meet you. Yeah. Let's sit down. Let's have some dim sum. Let's talk. Tell us more about your guitar playing influences. Tell us more about them. Do you like that man, Jimi Hendrix, at all by any chance? They didn't do that. They're like, Sonny boy, sit down here. You're going to listen to us. That's exactly what happened when Tony Guitar Sling and Blinken sat down with them. They have Saturn over there. Generally, Saturn is pretty good for a binding contract and a binding word in the 7th house. Not bad, right? Accidentally exalted. But that square with Chiron, I think that's where their problems when they were dealing with COVID. That was the problem. People wanted to fucking go back to their lives. And that Saturn and Virgo would not let go. No. Report, test. They were running those people ragged. They had enough. And it was the young kids that were like, tell them to go fuck off. So if they had, and they can't jail a 13-year-old kid, right? Or they can't jail a bunch, because that's their future. They can't alienate the future. So they had to modify the program a little bit. This is a weird chart, though. Very weird. You don't know where they're coming from. You just don't know where they're coming from with that 8th house. Do I think they're going to do it? I think they're going to do it. I think they'll do it. I think they'll do it because of Jupiter and the nodal return and they got something else up their sleeve. So whatever they're going to do with Taiwan is only like part of a much larger plan. A much larger plan. And if you're going to force the United States to defend Taiwan right now, this would be the absolute best time to do it. Absolute best time to do it. The country is kind of in tatters. There's no leadership. We're overextended, right? It'd be the best time to do it. Now, you would have somebody like Mike Johnson. Oh my God, would he love a war with China? He would love a war with China. Are you kidding me? All the people who have a hard time with Israel or don't have a hard time with Israel, or they have a hard time with people that support what's going on with Israel, a China war would be they would love it. Because now they would have a clear object of their aggression. Because who doesn't fucking hate China? Right? Like who doesn't hate China? Everybody theoretically kind of hates China. Because China's been the bad guy. China does this and China does that. And the Wuhan flu, and China sneaks all these people across. They do, by the way. They sneak all these people across the border. Right. So people know that there is an undercurrent of subterfuge going on with China. Oh, we got to ban TikTok. We got to ban that terrible, nasty Chinese company, TikTok. Right. So war with China, like who would be down with the theoretical war with China? I wouldn't be, because I'm really not into war. Right. But all those hawks, and especially the hawks who are divided around Israel, well, now all of a sudden, we got an enemy that we can really agree upon. They can't even agree upon Russia. There's some people don't believe Russia's an enemy. There are people who believe Russia's an enemy. There's just all this division and fracture. But how much division and fracture would there be around China? Probably not a lot. Probably not a lot. So I could see, the U.S. kind of going balls to the wall, or trying to get people in the area to support Taiwan. You would have the Philippines and maybe Japan. Call in Japan and say, "Hey man, Japan, we need you, man. We need you, Japan. Yeah, I know we dropped that bomb on you a long time ago. Really fucked some shit up over there. Whatever the bomb was, by the way. But we need you now. We helped rebuild you. Remember, we helped you. We had that old Marshall Plan. You guys got real successful. We need you now. Remember back in the good old days, you had those zeros. Anyway, I can see them going after him for sure. Absolutely. June 12th. That's what I've heard. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Do we want to do a little where we are now? Yeah, the Santa kill thing is next level nuts, right? Fuck. Weird. But that's okay. He's got the secrets to the universe. He's got the secrets of the universe. Santa line kill. No problem. No problem. You know what? Every now and then, you got to sacrifice a good Catholic seminarian for the secrets of the universe to be downloaded into the mind of a prophet. Okay. Let's, what are we doing here? What are we doing? What the hell is going on here? I created you. All right, I got to tell this story. And I'll get into this. Here, I'll put this up here so you guys can look at this beautiful chart while I tell you this story. There you go. That's it was from today. 20. That's the wrong chart. Stop sharing. Wrong chart. Let me get the right chart. Hold on. I'll get there. Here, we'll just do it this way. So Robert Kennedy is a libertarian now. That's just so weird. He, like, his policies are about as far away as being a libertarian as possible. There's nothing remotely libertarian about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. That's such a Gemini fucking thing, isn't it? It's just Gemini. It's like, okay, well, we have two parties. We have the Republicrat and the Demopublican. The Republicrat and the Demopublican. Those are our two parties. But we have the Libertarians. Actually, we have one party. We have a uniparty. Oh, and now we have a second party, which is the Libertarian. He is not a fucking libertarian. Not even close. My God. Not even close. But hey, why not? Why not? We live in a wacky world. Okay, hold on. Where's now? I got lots of now. Here, let's just do this. Let's do it this way. Let's do a little editorializing. A little editing on the fly. 9:17. All right. There we go. There we go. That's what I'm talking about. This here chart. All right. So I'm going to put the chart up here. And I'll tell you the story. It's a funny fucking story. Okay. All right. So that's us. Okay. So this was back in, I think, it's like December of 1990. December of 1990. And I'd been working in Olympia, Washington at this restaurant. Like, I had triples for three weeks at this restaurant. And I was the banquet waiter at this restaurant. I had triples for 3 weeks. So I'd worked my ass off. It's the holidays. All the groups are done meeting. I don't have any shifts until after the first of the year. So I'm kind of free, right? And I'd made some good money and I'm going to go hit the road. I had a dog, so I couldn't really travel by flight. Back in the day, you couldn't put your dog on a plane back in the day. Now I guess you can get away with it. But so I decide that for whatever reason, I think it's going to be warmer in Montana. And it's kind of snowing in the Seattle area. So I get in my car and I decide I'm going to go drive to Montana. I've never been to Montana. It's the holidays. I'm going to go drive to Montana. So I go through the Snoqualmie Pass and it is snowing like crazy. And all these SUVs are like on the side of the road, like turtles turned over, like they thought that they could rip the road, but they couldn't. And I'm like, and I got a little Hyundai, a little 4-door Hyundai. I'm like, I got to be really careful here. So I managed to go through the pass and I get out to Eastern Washington where it's nice and bright and sunny. I haven't gone outside. I just know it's nice and bright and sunny. And I go to a gas station and I look at the temperature on the outside. I'm like, that can't be right. It was 2. And outside, it was the fucking coldest weather I'd ever experienced. I'm like, man, this is really fucking cold. So I drive to what you call Spokane, and I'm going to spend the Christmas holidays by myself in Spokane because in my mind I'm going to Montana. I'm thinking, I don't know where my head was at, but I'm thinking, hey, there's a banana belt in Montana during the winter, and I'm going to find it. Like, I'm not sure where the logic around that was. So I go to Spokane and I find this bed. This is a bed and breakfast. It's not, they didn't have, like a Verbo or Airbnb back then. So it's a room in a home. It's a big home. It's in Spokane. I got my dog. My dog stay there. Really nice people. And I think I saw Dances with Wolves. He was playing that night. That's a pretty cool movie, whatever. So the next day, I have another story about this, but I'm gonna leave it on the side. So the next day, I'm out walking my dog, and there's a woman out there, and she's got this camera, and she's trying to figure out how to take a picture with this camera. And I'm like, well, here, let me help you. And it's snow on the ground and everything. So I help her with the camera, and she figures it out. And she said, well, where are you from? And I said, well, I live in Olympia, but I'm staying over here at this house. It's a bed and breakfast. I'm here for the holidays. So it's Christmas Day, right? Said, well, why don't you come by tonight and join us for a Christmas drink? I'm like, okay, sure. No problem. Sounds good. So she said, I live right over there. She gave me, I said, oh, okay. I see where you live. So I leave my dog, I think either back at the room or my car or whatever. I think back at the room. And I walk over there and I knock on the door, and she answers the door and she says, don't worry about him. He's just had a little bit to drink. I'm like, really? Yeah, he's fine. And I go in there, and there's this guy, it's her husband, and he's sitting at the kitchen table, and he's fucking smashed. This guy's smashed. And he's like, who are you? And I tell him my name. And he looked at me, he said, I created you. I said, what? He said, I created you. And I said, oh, really? He said, yeah, you weren't here before, but you're here now, and I created you. And I said, you know what? I created you too, because I wasn't here before, and now I'm here, and you're here. So I created you as well. And he said, yeah, you kind of did, didn't you? And this is how the conversation goes with this dude. Like, I'm trying to carry on this conversation and have a Christmas drink with this guy. And his wife is not drinking, but she's kind of devious, right? She's kind of devious. And this guy has this system of drinking where I think he was drinking Seagram 7, right? So he would take Seagram 7 and he would pour it in a glass and he would hold it up and he would drink it. And then he would go to the refrigerator and he would get a bottle of 7-Up. Now, his wife had taken a piece of paper and covered the label of the 7-Up bottle, and she had drawn a skull and crossbones on this fucking bottle of 7-Up. And then he would go to the refrigerator and open it up and then swig the 7-Up and put the cap back on it and put it back in the refrigerator. And this is what he did I must have been there for about an hour and a half or 2 hours. I can't even remember what I talked about with these people and this guy primarily. And this woman she must have been a Gemini. She's a little devious, right? A little devious. And I don't know what her idea behind putting the skull and crossbones on the fucking plastic 7-Up bottle was. But that's why I said I created you, right? I walk in, he says, who are you? I created you. So remember that. Remember that. Anybody walks into your house, it's brand new, just, ask them, say, who are you? Did you know that I created you? Well, how do you know? Well, Terrence Howard told me. All right. So that's where we are right now, astrologically. There's that glorious Jupiter in Gemini. Boy, are we going to have some fun with that, huh? Are we going to have some fun with that Jupiter in Gemini? It's going to be crazy. Crazy. I like it. I know it's in its detriment. right? We're going to have all kinds of fractals. So many fractals, so many pieces of the puzzle, so many rabbit holes, so many dot connections. It's going to be crazy. Crazy. I like it. We need a little more crazy. And this, and I think crazy in a good way, right? Like if you want to check out and have your own pocket universe, Jupiter and Gemini is your friend. You literally can just go create your own little fractal and your own little reality with Jupiter and Gemini, especially now with that trine, that nice trine with Pluto. Look at that. You can just, create it. By the way, I got so close today to buying a Mustang. I was really close today. Really, really close. Like not just any Mustang, but like one that like a 20-year-old who's just coming out of acne with that kind of Mustang. But for some reason, I've been thinking, I really want a vehicle that's really fast for the end times. I want a fucking 8-cylinder with a 5-speed so I can outrun some shit. No, I don't know why I became kind of obsessed with this idea of getting a Mustang. Like I have a car that I drive and I have a truck that I don't drive. And I'm thinking I could take this car and this truck and I could go to this dealer and I could trade these in. I could probably give the guy about $2,000 cash and I could roll off that lot with that badass fucking black Mustang with the tinted windows. And I still have enough money left over to get a red racing stripe right down the center of it. Right? That's where my Jupiter and Gemini is going. That's where it's going. I'm like, oh, okay. For some reason, I've gotten Mustang horny. That's all I'm saying. But I didn't do it. I still might, but I didn't do it. Jupiter and Gemini is travel too, right? It's travel. So here's what I would say. It's so funny too. We had this experience on Friday night. It's like, hey, let's go to the east side of town. And if you've ever been to Kerrville, right? Like you could cover pretty much all of Kerrville in about an hour, to be honest. All of it. So we're, and there's really no place to eat here. There's no place to eat. I mean, there is, but it's not really, it's okay. So I'm like, hey, let's go to that Mexican restaurant in Fredericksburg that because the Mexican restaurants here are kind of lacking. I hate to say it. And I'm not alone in this. And I said, hey, let's go to that Mexican restaurant in Fredericksburg. I thought, yeah, it's a little far. I'm like, hey, I was on the east side today. And like, I think there's something happening on the east side. There's something happening over there. Let's go over to the east side. Maybe we'll find something on the east side. And lo and behold, we drive over there and I find this Mexican restaurant that I never knew existed. Never knew it existed. It was like, where the fuck did this place come from? Right? Like I asked her, how long have you been open for? Oh, 17 years. I had never seen this place before. Now, I know it's been there for 17 years, but it was like a tree in the woods moment. Like I created that restaurant. We kind of did because we were looking for something different over, and there it was. It just popped in out of the blue, right? That's a Jupiter and Gemini moment, this little pocket universe. So explore your area. Like you think you know your area, you may not really know your area. I didn't know that. It's like, there it was. You know what? It wasn't that bad either. I might even go back. And they will go back. Anyway, that's what I'm talking about with Jupiter and Gemini. Like there is treasure to be found. You don't have to go halfway across the world, although sometimes it can feel pretty good. But there is treasure to be found right where you are. Right where you are. It can be down the street, around the corner, over the hill, maybe over on the east side. That's Jupiter and Gemini. It's right under your nose. The treasure is right under your nose. The answers are right under your nose. And it might be the most mundane thing, right? And it's like, wow, look at this. Now, the downside with that is sometimes you can make the most mundane thing and blow it up way out of proportion. And then people are like, what the fuck is he talking about? It's really not that big of a deal, right? Can't you see it? Can't you see it? Like, it's all connected, right? That's Jupiter and Gemini. But I like it. We went through this real big bull run with crypto. I don't know if it's over or not because Jupiter is Gemini, but we're in a different kind of currency now. We're in a different currency. That was digital, literally digital currency. Uranus and Taurus. Gemini is intellectual currency. It's information as currency. And I also feel like this is a good, when I think of Gemini, I think of, kind of being eternally youthful. So if you want to start turning back the clock, Jupiter and Gemini is your friend. It's definitely your friend. So what are you going to do? Well, first of all, you got to be curious. Second of all, you got to be playful. Gemini likes games. They like games. They like board games, they like parlor games, they like puzzles, right? So you've got to be curious and you've got to be playful. And if you're interested in reverse aging or slowing down the aging process, Jupiter and Gemini will give you plenty of impetus to look into it, right? And Gemini is also about being mobile and getting up and moving. Taurus is kind of sluggish. We've had sluggish energy with Jupiter and Taurus for about a year now. We don't have that sluggish energy with Jupiter and Gemini. It's going to be fast, really, really fast. Maybe that's why I want this car. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking I want to go fast. And I actually have a car that goes pretty fast, but there's something deliciously delightful about a black fucking V8 Mustang with Jupiter and Gemini. I just have to say. Anyway, maybe we should do a poll. Should I get the Mustang? Look, here, I'll do a poll. I'll do a Twitter poll. Let me see what you guys do. Here we go. This is a Jupiter and Gemini thing. This is what you do with Jupiter and Gemini. Let me see if I can do a poll here. Hold on. Banners. Banner. Create a banner. Brand, private chat. Got a comment here. I don't know. Can I do a poll? Let me see. New layout. Present. Let's see. Slides. Camera, video file. No, I don't think so. I thought you could do like a poll. Let me see. Banner. Breaking news. Private chat. Comments. Let me see if I can do comments. Oh. Post a comment. No, I don't think so. All right. If I could do a poll, I'd put it up there. Anyway, Jupiter and Gemini, have some fun, amuse yourself, entertain yourself, be amused, but don't try to make trivial things into major issues. I would steer clear of that. And I would steer clear of gossip bigly with Jupiter and Gemini. It's also a time literally of reflection. And meeting ourselves in the world. We'll have a lot of that with Jupiter and Gemini. And some of it will be reflections that we'll look at them and go, wow, that's a pretty good reflection. And some of them will be like, that's me? Oh my God, I should probably, readdress this and look at this from a different place inside myself. right? That's the beauty of Jupiter and Gemini. It's Echo and Narcissus. You'll get both. And both of them may be equally true and equally false, right? And you may see a reflection that you may not like very much, but it might not be the true reflection. It may be a projection of something that you haven't fully dealt with or worked out, and you still hang on to it and you cling to it. And that's what you identify with, but it's not the true reflection, right? The true reflection is that you're probably not that, that you are kinder and more gentle or more humble or more gracious or more generous or more courageous or whatever than you're looking at, right? But because, we're all kind of wounded, we identify sometimes with reflections that really are not that great, but they really aren't us either, right? It's more of a reflection of who we have been at another time in our lives. And conversely, we may see something where we think it's really, really great, right? And that's not us either, right? That's a projection of a part of ourselves that likes to see ourselves in a certain way and wants other people to see us in that way as well, so they can uphold that image. But that may not be true either. But it also could be in both instances as well. Welcome to Jupiter and Gemini. Welcome. And whenever I think of Gemini, I always think of Janus and the two-faced god, right? And the masks of comedy and tragedy, and how they both play a role in our lives. And I think that the best thing that you can do with Jupiter and Gemini is stay nimble and stay agile and learn how to dance on the head of a pin. Right? That's my advice. Stay nimble, stay agile, learn how to dance on the head of a pin, and don't be afraid to turn the tables on yourself every now and then. Right? I think that's not a bad thing to do. Information is currency, and your treasures, your nearest and dearest treasures, are right underneath your nose. And I really, really hope that if people have suffered fractured families and fractured familial relations, that Jupiter Gemini, especially early on with that trine with Pluto, can smooth those things out. Because it's important. And I know for some of you, divorcing yourselves from your family has been a powerful experience, right? Like Jesus said, you must leave your parents. When he's in Samaria, his family wants him to go back with him. He says, no, these are my people now, right? So we know that there's that psychological mindset. And we live, look, I just lost my mother and my father passed away 10 years ago. And I've got no real relatives to speak of, with the exception of my son. That's it, right? That's it. That's pretty much all I have left. And, this extended family that has, connected through this show and through other events. We've all kind of met each other. And if we haven't, we meet each other in spirit, right? But I know that there are some of you that do have family. And from somebody who doesn't have any, with the exception of my son, from my perspective, I think if there are relationships worth salvaging and repairing, then I would advocate that. And especially with Jupiter and Gemini trining Pluto, and I know that they've done everything in their power to atomize us. And we have the power to, at the very least, remember who we are, where we came from, and that at certain points along the way that there were people that we remember as being human and part of us and part of our blood, even if, we've had a wayward journey somewhere over the last 4 to 5 years. So I would say if there's an opportunity to salvage those relationships, I would do it. I would do it. Now, if you have to go grovel on your hands and knees and kiss their ass, well, maybe that's a bridge too far. But I would say that having a relatively flexible and non-judgmental attitude can go a long ways if you really wanted to reestablish some kind of a bond with somebody that you were close to. Because I think these things matter. I really do. All right. A couple of things before we sign off here. We've got the locals page, and you can join locals and you can become a supporting member of locals as well. Once you become a member, there's a prompt that if you want to become a supporting member, you can do that. It's $10 a month. And I have my first locals presentation I'm doing for the group on the 8th of June. And it's all about the summer, the astrological summer. So I'll be breaking that down for the friends at locals. And so we have a date for our gathering here. It's the first weekend of October. And this week, I'm going to start to put everything together. Right? Everything together. This week, we're going to put everything together. And I'm going to start on the budgeting process. And the one of the featured speakers at this year's event is Mario from Symbolic Studies. And if you have spent any time in Longo's world, you'll know that Mario has been a guest on Longo's world on numerous occasions. I've had him on the Friday Farcast. He's a graphic designer. He's an amazing illustrator. He gets into the deep esoteric imagery of every sign of every month. And I'm really excited to have him be a part of our gathering this year. He's so talented. He's really, really talented. He's also very steeped in the tarot, and he's just a great guy. And it works out. So check it out. So he and his wife are getting married, or his fiance are getting married 2 weeks before the event. And then they're coming here. And they were thinking about coming to Texas and checking out Austin and some comedy. And lo and behold, we're right here. So, when stuff like that happens, it's like, oh, Jupiter and Gemini. Yes, timing good, sing good. So we're going to have more, but he's the first guest that I'm announcing. So that's Mario from Symbolic Studies. And I'll start to put some of this stuff out on the websites over the course of the next week to 2 weeks. So you wanted some information. There it is. We got a date and our first announced guest speaker and participant at the 5th. This is our 5th year. This is our 5th year of our gathering here in the Hill Country for the Harvest Moon. And it just keeps getting better every year. And I hope to see as many of you this year as possible. All right. Thanks for being here. Locals, if you want to buy me a cup of coffee, I don't have the link here, but it might be in the chat. What else? If you're interested in getting a reading with me, that's there as well. For everybody that has purchased a cup of coffee or various cups of coffee, thank you so much for doing that. I really appreciate it, particularly since my relationship with PayPal is in the rearview mirror, right? And I was never able to monetize this channel on YouTube anyway. So it's been really cool that you guys have reached out and done that. So thank you very much. All right. Oh, Astro Dads. We're doing another episode of Astro Dads tomorrow. We're recording it. It's me and Ferris, and we'll probably going to air it. Let's see. What's the calendar looking like? We'll probably air it this Saturday, right? Hold on. Let me just check here. Where are we? We go into June. Where's June? Come on, June. Yeah. May 1st. Hold on. Where are we? June 1st. Right. Okay. So that's what we're going to do. So Astro Dads will air on Saturday. And so we're going to have Astro Dads on the first day of LGBTQ plus Pride Month. That's good. It's fitting. All right. And then we'll be back on the following Saturday over on Locals with the astrology for the summer. That's what we're just cooking over here. We're cooking. Thanks for being here. Enjoy the rest of your night. We'll see you back here on Tuesday for the Astro Weather. God bless. Bye for now.